In this episode, my friend Pete and I sat down and we talked about qualified plans, defined contribution, defined benefit plans. We spent a lot of time on cash balance plans and really some of the considerations that are required and then the exit strategies that should be considered. So thank you for listening. We had fun and hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Banker Life Podcast. I'm your host, James Neathery, and I'm excited today because I have my friend Pete Whitman in the office here in the studio. And Pete's from Tennessee. He's been in the financial services industry for quite some time. And we're going to just get caught up. And it's been a while since we, had the opportunity to speak with each other. And he's going to share his experience, his background, and we're just going to have a lovely conversation. And we invite you to listen if you wish. So thank you. Hello, Pete.
Hey, James. Thanks for getting together with me again.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
good
for times.
Coming in.
Yeah.
So you're from Tennessee.
From Tennessee. Not originally.
Well, just give us your background and go back as far as you want and, come forward.
Sure. Was born in Delaware. Parents were missionaries to Australia. So spent middle school and high school years in Australia. Came back, actually ended up at the University of Delaware. Needed a way to pay for school. Missionaries don't make a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so I got recruited to sell books door to door with Southwestern.
Bibles?
Yeah, that was one of the products. They were actually student handbooks. So if you imagine having all your classes from like third grade through your senior year in high school neatly indexed and outlined, that's kind of what they were. They were study guides. Of course, now we have the internet. So those are probably, I haven't seen a book person come by my house in over a decade. So,
yeah, I don't think I've ever.
They used to come by pretty regularly when, a few years back when my kids were young. But yeah, I sold books for them for 3 summers as a student, paid my entire way through school, and then moved into a sales management role with them for a couple summers. And interesting enough is Southwestern had started an insurance company.
Southwestern Life?
It was actually called Family Heritage Life.
Oh, yeah, I'm familiar.
And so I got sort of recruited. I was kind of done with the book thing. It was a lot of long hours and a lot of travel.
But you were like trained in the 1950 door-to-door, store-to-store, door-to-door, floor-to-floor. Yeah.
School of hard knocks, man.
Yeah.
Was, you always knew every day when you got up, there's always going to be somebody who didn't want to see you.
Some things never change.
That does not. But you learn persistence and how to keep going in those. And they really did form a lot of who I was in terms of where I was going. So I graduated with an engineering degree, but then I moved in more into business. I like business a whole lot better than I like engineering. I got bored with engineering, sitting in an office cubicle solving mathematical problems
on paper
and not talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So it's like, wait a minute, that's not who I am. I like talking with people. I still love solving problems. So I wouldn't give away my engineering degree for anything because it taught me critical thinking. And of course I had a minor in business along with that. So got a floor of economics and money-based things. Money, credit, and banking was one of the classes I took in college. So you got a good round of that. But I moved to Tennessee and got licensed in insurance in December of 93. So I've been around the insurance business 93.
Is that about 29 years?
Yeah, it's 29 years.
Yeah.
So been around
you
a little.
Don't look that old.
Well, my forehead does.
If you had hair, it'd be gray.
Yeah, that's right. If I had hair, it might even be white. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. But it started out in insurance, and I've worked on both sides. The company side, I was a rep and a district sales manager for American Medical Security, which was bought out by United Healthcare on the benefit side. I've worked on the agency side. I've worked with property and casualty.
I can't think of anything more exciting than working in a home office.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, that was fortunately it was a satellite office.
Oh, perfect.
That. I ran the area in the state of Tennessee and in the district area. So I was covering territory on it. But it was that lasted a little while. They wanted me to move to Memphis after United Healthcare bought it, and I was like, that's not really going to happen. Yeah. My wife would not approve of that move. So just a personal preference.
Yeah, like across the state or
yeah. So Nashville's right in the center of the state, and Memphis is on the west side.
I gotcha.
So you got mountains.
So you were in Nashville, and they wanted you to move to Memphis.
They wanted me to move to Memphis. Yeah, which is sultry, very hot. It's flat. It's in the Delta area. It's low level.
The mosquitoes come.
And the mosquito. Yeah, it just wasn't. It wasn't one of the places I enjoyed. Yeah. Enjoyed going. So I was like, I can't see myself living there. But so I moved back to the agency side. I actually worked for in church insurance for a period of time, which that was interesting. Mm-hmm. So both property and casualty. And then when I hit the agency side, I worked in a full service insurance agency, quote unquote full service. And I would pass off clients for retirement services, whatever, or even individual stuff. And that department would inadvertently just screw it up. And I didn't like my clients getting screwed up because then they leave.
Sure.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go get my license to handle retirement planning on the benefit side, because that's why I was heavy into that.
So when you say benefits, you're talking about health benefits, retirement benefits,
so
plans, and
when I was working with American Medical Security, that was a health benefit side.
I've said, hey, we're not going to mention life insurance.
They're gone.
You've mentioned five so far.
Times. So okay. That one's gone, but they were bought out by another benefits company. Right. So health benefits, dental, vision, all of that, and then expanded into retirement benefits. Right. So the whole benefits realm for small businesses, and I gravitated towards small businesses because it is an area that nobody wants to play in. It's an area that's very limited, and the people who do play in it, they don't get great advice. When you have big companies, there's usually somebody handles that in HR or something, and these guys don't usually have an HR arm. Right. So that's kind of where I gravitate to. Is interesting because the progression of my career started off with product focus, where you're focused on selling one single product. And as things go on, when I worked on that agency side, I really learned that it wasn't about the product. It was really about what was best for the client. And so there was a definite shift.
How long did it take you? Because you came to that yourself. The industry didn't say, okay, you're going to focus on what's best for the client. I mean, they give lip service to that, but that's not the way they necessarily train their agents.
No.
And so you just discovered that naturally by being in the business. How long did it? Are you a slow learner?
Me too. I'm a slow learner. So you said I started in December of 93. That was in 2004 that I figured that out. So a decade of selling product. Hey, this is the next greatest product. This is the next greatest product. Right. Oh no, this one's even better than that one. Well,
I sold you that one last year. Let me say this year. It was that was the path of just the cycle. Yeah. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way to doing this, and other than coming back and reselling something that's better each year. And it almost was training the agent to come out and go, okay, so when's the next greatest product coming up? I've already sold that. I need something else. And you to go back to the companies and go, hey, this is what we need. They would come and I was on advisory boards. So they would go, what are you seeing out there? What do we need to add? Right. And so then we talk about what people were talking about, and then they would add some kind of rider or endorsement or something on there to make it better. And so it was interesting how this cycle just kept perpetuating. And it kind of dawned on me. I still remember it. I was in with a client. He goes, so Pete, every year you come back and show me something that's the next greatest thing. He goes, what I want to know is, what do you think about helping what I need? So you had a little help in your revelation.
It was a client who actually brought it out to me.
Perfect, yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I love that. Clients today, the general public, once they get interested in a particular idea or concept, I mean, they're educated. I mean, more so now than ever, and which is a good thing.
Yeah. So I look at my nephew who's 33, I guess, and if he wants to find something out, he'll go do all the research, and if it interests him, and you'll have a conversation, he'll know more than most because he'll go do all. You have the research all at your fingertips. Yeah. So
it's
you're right.
Deplatformed, right?
Yeah,
you got to search.
You have to search.
Yeah.
And he even said, he goes, you got to dig. He goes, if you really want to know, you got to dig past page 3 on the Google list. Yeah. Right. So he goes, not everything on page 1 is.
It's all paid gospel on page 1. Yeah. I love that. Type in infinite banking or Nelson Nash, and all the people that are buying that keyword search are coming up at the top, and if it wasn't for Google, they probably wouldn't even know how to spell IBC. I digress. Okay. That's right. I agree. Most of the stuff on the front page it's all paid. Add.
Yeah. So from that point, I was like, and also that combined with that was the fact that here I'm given this other department retirement stuff,
and they're dropping the ball.
And they're dropping the ball. And I'm going, okay, there's got to be a better way. And so everything started shifting at that point from, hey, what's the product to what's right for the client. Right. And I went and got licensed with securities back then and got my 663, and all I use now is a 65, which, that's quote unquote the fiduciary, which we've already had a conversation about how that definition has changed.
Before the camera and the mics were on, we were talking about fiduciary, and that's known about in the industry. Like, I'm a fiduciary and you're not, and then the correct definition of fiduciary is a little vague. It depends on the latest court ruling. Anyway, so. That was our side
our side conversation on it. But at the time, it became more important to what is the client's needs, and where they're at. So we became really, when I started the agency in 2007. It was the end of 6, but beginning of 7. That was going to be our focus, was on what was the best for the client, and what we did is kind of pulled all 3 legs of a stool together. The property and casualty piece, we brought the group benefits piece together, we brought the retirement piece all together. And, in truth, everybody hears 401k, that's what you should do. That may not be what they need to do. Mm-hmm. And especially if an owner needs to be advantaged because he's later on in life and hasn't done a whole lot of retirement savings and put a ton of money away, and they need to get a lot of money away quickly. It gives, we went and looked at some advantages of how do you do that? How do you make the owner, because 401k, everybody's got to be treated the same. Right. According to the Department of Labor regulations on
ERISA, baby.
ERISA, that's it. So everybody's got to be treated likewise. There's ways to do top-heavy provisions, but it has to be done correctly. Yeah. And you need an actuary to help solve
so
that.
You're then now kind of you're talking about like cash balance plans, deferred comp,
correct,
qualified, non-qualified.
Yeah. So you have all those things that are available to any small business. They don't think they're available because no one's ever told them about it. And all they ever hear is, hey, I just need a 401k. Right. So
and then they look at the nightmare of administration that requires.
Right. And there's a lot of administration, so it's important to have someone who knows what they're doing on that end. And actually, 401k is a whole lot more paperwork than even like cash balance, for example. But you can even get less paperwork if you go to some of the other things. And we talked about executive bonuses. There's ones that you can say, hey, I want to give it for my key guy here, and I want to keep him so we can put some golden handcuffs on him.
Key man, executive bonus, double executive bonus, and then you're talking about the terminology in the industry is discrimination with that plan. So you can't discriminate with a 401k. You have to all employees are treated equally. And, there's some requirements, but income and all that and terms of service. But like in a cash balance plan or a top heavy, these words, you can discriminate. You can carve out classes of employees. So you discriminate, don't include some, and focus on carve out others. And so the small business owner can, and not in a negative way, I'm not saying, but that's the term, discrimination. You can carve out these people. I'm not going to provide a benefit for you. I'm only going to provide a benefit for me or a carved out class of employees.
Right. So here's my carved out class that I want to provide the maximum benefit to, and I can take some other rank and file, for example, employees, and we can provide less of a benefit. And the real reality is the 401k, you can't put enough in it to retire on. It's really difficult, especially when you're looking at where inflation is today.
Yeah. And if the market goes up 12% a year every year. You're from Tennessee. I mean, come on. I mean, don't you live in the suburbs of that, church rat? I mean, I need to quit.
Yeah. we live down in Franklin.
I'm kidding.
We live in Franklin. Yes, you are correct. But the market's not going to, I mean, look at it right now. It's down 25% on the year. I mean, the market's going to do this. And you can literally if you structure it right, you can level the playing field on that. Depending on what you're doing, so you don't have to have that risk if you don't want it,
or as much of it.
Yeah. You can minimize the risk on that.
Is that cash balance plan kind of what you're referring to?
Correct. Cash balance or any kind of defined benefit plan. Yeah. There's a very special one that uses only guaranteed instruments called a 412 plan.
Yeah.
And that one's a little more restrictive.
Yeah.
There's not as much flexibility in it, but it fits for certain employers.
Yeah. But most all of that is, this, and I get the benefits. If I'm an owner and I have a particular time period, I haven't saved enough because all of the capital has gone into the business, and I may or may not be able to sell it. And if I do sell it, that has its own ramifications. Maybe I'm doing several ways to sell a business. If it's sellable, right? But then so if I haven't saved enough, right? All the capital's gone into, the property, the building, whatever. And now, I'm getting into the short rows because we're having birthdays, time's passing as we speak. And now I got to catch up on my savings or my investing or my retirement, Now I can carve people out. I mean, not that they're excluded 100%. I'm not saying that. Mm-mm. But I can discriminate against them and heavily weight benefits, to myself.
Correct.
Right? And so,
you're the small business owner. You've taken all the risk all these years.
Yeah.
So yes, we can advantage that
right.
to it. And typically we want to try to advantage it to 75, 80 plus percent going back to ownership.
Right.
If realistically we can. I've got some plans that have 90 plus go back to the owners, and because they need to catch up. They're getting long in the tooth, and it's 10 years away from retirement.
Yeah.
And they don't have much time.
I get it. And so the cash balance plan doesn't have to use guaranteed products.
Does not.
It can, but it's limited to how much, and guaranteed products, I'm talking about life insurance and annuities. So a cash balance plan can, be all equities or regular old portfolio, however it's, allocated across the asset classes. But you can bring in life insurance and annuities, and then it's limited, but you can bring that in. And then that is really, you're accumulating capital for retirement, but you're getting a tax deduction today, and it's quite heavy.
Correct.
So, if you're a high income earner and you're putting a lot of money in there, then, you get the tax advantage up front. You get the deduction. So and I get the equities or the equity type advisor, agent, or person, they're always focusing on a rate of return, where some of these plans does not focus on the rate of return. Mm-hmm. It focuses on the tax deduction today. Right. And then there's a lot, you have to have an actuary and all the calculations.
So if you think of that of a balance beam, the cash, that's what's called cash balance. It's a balance beam. And so the actuary comes in and says, okay, if you get high interest rates, and you have lower contribution because you're really calculating out for the end of the rainbow.
Right.
So you're already calculating out, you're trying to average out what the rate of return is every year. So if you have a great rate of return this year, you only have to put less in. Now, this is where some of the airlines and things got in trouble with defined benefit plans when they flipped the switch and the market went the other way. Now here's the problem. The market's down. Guess what? Now I got to dump a ton more money in to get it back into balance again. So what ends up happening is the balance beam gets out of whack. So the one thing the guaranteed products do is it levels that playing field so you're consistent every year and you don't have to deal with this going up and down. And so that's one of the things. And I know there's some companies out there that might be trying to work on with ERISA and the government to try to level the playing field over taking a snapshot over time.
I'm sure there's collusion going on every day in Washington.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a negative guy. I'm just kind of a realist, right? And I'm a absolute contrarian. And then and I know it's not about me. This is about Pete, but. And I'm not even justifying what I'm saying. I'm explaining, giving some context.
Sure. Well, there's, like I told you my brother guarded centers for a living, and he said there's a bunch of horse trading going on.
Yeah. That's all it is. It's all graft, and how much I get paid to participate in it. And, so, okay, I don't mean to throw y'all.
No, that's okay. So you have this balance beam so that, you can put it wherever you want.
Yeah.
But if you go really high on the market does really well, then you don't get the big tax break.
Right.
And then the flip side is usually when the economy's down and the markets are down, a lot of businesses are down the same way, and they have to come up with this big amount of money to try to dump in there to keep it keep the playing field
exactly.
level.
So, and then you mentioned the airlines. I had my friend Paul Horsley on, who's an NNI practitioner and a pilot, and his wife is a pilot, and his awakening came whenever they were going through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
The airlines and the pension guarantee, the PBGC guarantees the pension, within limits, right? And so he was faced at the time of retirement, his pension getting shredded, and a couple of other things going on in his life. I mean, that was the genesis of his awakening that the construct is not for me to benefit me. So.
So you just have to understand, and here's my point on this, is you have to understand what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And you have to, because there's definite advantages, but you also need to understand the disadvantages in order to get to my revelation that I talked about earlier, which is what's best for the client. Right. So is this plan for everybody? No, it's not.
Right.
It's definitely not.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I mean, if
it fits, great.
Yeah. I mean, my philosophy has been for the longest time that, every business at every level has advisors, people that they rely on for information and some, consultants and whatever their business is. But, you'll have the tax guy, you'll have the attorney, right? You'll have the retirement benefits guy or the investment guy, the life insurance guy or the insurance guy on property and casualty. I mean, there's a place at the table for everyone, in my opinion, if the best interest of the client is the focus.
There in essence is where the key is. And that was the revelation I had back in 2004 I was telling you about. It took me a decade to realize that it's not about what product I had.
Right.
I now have access to a plethora of products.
Right.
And so in reality, my agency itself represents 60 different companies that do different things and have different niches that they can help with.
Right.
But the reality is what's best for the client.
Right.
And
now, see, if you're in a position to have 60 different companies, I mean, then you're relying on a lot of people to keep you up to speed on those 60 different
companies. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, 60 companies are, 5,000 products. I don't know.
Yeah,
but you mentioned it. Every product or concept, has its advantages and disadvantages, and you got to know and understand what you're getting into. I mean, I don't want to throw you off track, but I want to come back.
Let's come back to this. So, you look at advantages. Advantages on a cash balance plan. Obviously, we just talked about the tax, the big tax break, right?
And so there's others too, but we'll talk about the cash balance plan. Right. Okay.
So cash balance or defined benefit plans, they fall underneath that same
benefit plan.
So so you have a tax break is great.
And let's talk about that for a minute. There's a defined contribution, which is 401k. Right. You can put this much in, right? If you're this age, there's catch up and blah, blah, blah. And the defined benefit is, you work so many years in a certain age or what have you, but at retirement, there is a benefit for you.
Right. So the difference between, if you want to remember the difference between the two, contribution, defined contribution, I'm defining what I'm putting in. Right. I don't know what I'm going to get at the end of the rainbow.
Right.
If the market goes to hell in a handbasket, for example, you may end up with very little.
But the market always goes up.
It goes up, yeah.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So the flip side of that is a defined benefit plan does have guarantees in it. It is defining what your benefit is. Right. So if we go back to history a little bit, World War II was when pensions started becoming big.
Oh, please, let's talk about that.
In reality, they had a freeze on how much salary you could make.
Well, during the war, so there's, government controls all across the board and all of these GIs coming back, right? And, oh my gosh, we got to give them something to do or bad things are going to happen. And so there's a flood now into the job market.
Right.
And so how do you give a benefit, or how do you pay an employee more? How do you retain an employee? Right. So the defined benefits come from that. Paul Perot, 1950, he wrote a pamphlet called The Pension Idea. We've talked about it on, this channel many times, and that's available at our website. And it's also available at the Nelson Nash Institute. So, and Nelson Nash himself brought that back into publication, 15, 16 years ago. And so Paul Perot, in his pamphlet, The Pension Idea, foretold what the outcome would be with pensions. And here we are, 72 plus years later, and it's happening. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in pensions and history, that's a good book pamphlet to have in your
so that's how they came. They capped off what salaries could be, and they needed a way to attract and retain, because why do I want to go work for you for 60 hours a week? Because back in the 50s, that's when people were starting to work a lot more. Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were already working. But but this was there was a dramatic shift from working at home or working on the farm to working in factories.
Right.
In quote unquote for the man. If you get to the 60s, that's what they call it. You're working for the man. Okay, so in that historical context, they had a cap on how much they could earn. They come up with this, let's come up with a defined benefit plan. And essentially it was to try to give people 50% of what their top 3 average year earnings were after they retired.
They all government programs have an altruistic selling point and theme, right? We've got to save the children. You can't take care of yourself in retirement. Here's Social Security, which is nothing more than a tax. There's no Social Security trust fund. It's a tax, period. So it's not your money. They took it from you through taxation. And if you make it through all their hoops, you'll get, an income in the future, because they need you to be dependent upon them, right? So I'm just saying that.
So any kind of government plan, you always have to ask yourself a question. A simple question is if it's from the government, is it good for me?
Yeah, and you can pretty much a good rule of thumb, and I know it's broad brush, but big canvas. Whatever the title of the program is, doesn't matter. 180 degrees opposite is the purpose and the outcome.
Is that like the Inflation Reduction Act?
Exactly. That's a prime example, right? And then too, while I'm on it, loving the government, when they throw out numbers, we're going to send $60 billion to the Ukraine. You can multiply that number by several factors. Anyway, okay.
Yep. Well, there'll be little nuances there to give you bumps along the way.
Oh yeah, and they all got to get paid, you know, in the background.
So that, I mean, there is no single one bill that covers one thing. Yep. There's always extra pork in that does it. So like I said, when you're looking at this, you have to understand both the advantage and disadvantage. Right. Yes, you get the tax break, but okay, so now think about this and you and I have had this discussion about 3 different buckets of money. There's the bucket of money.
Telling me about how you think that.
So you got one bucket of money that your money goes in after tax. This is like your savings account. You get an interest rate and you have to pay taxes on the way out. Yeah. Right. Then you have the bucket of money that's pre-tax, which is what this is. This qualified money. It goes in without tax. But when you take it out, what happens? Every dime you take out is taxed at whatever tax bracket you happen to be at the time you take it out.
Yeah, right.
So if you're trying to
which is unknown.
Yeah, it's unknown.
The calculations are going to change 15 times.
I mean, has taxes changed at all in the last 50 years?
They've gone one way.
So, you know, we've gone. I remember back in the early 70s, my parents were screaming at the high taxes,
90%.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
But you could write a ton of stuff off. So the deductions, the exemptions, the exclusions, all of that always changes. The brackets change. And,
the brackets change everything. So you don't know what that number is. Right. It's an unknown. You just know you're going to have to pay tax on it. So when you're taking the money out of the bucket,
I'm getting the warm and fuzzies as we go. You know?
When you're taking money out of the bucket, you better have someone help you strategically on taking the money out. Otherwise, you're going to be giving a lot of it away.
So you're implying then that if you're like working with uber smart people, that you might not pay as much tax comparatively. Not working.
Yeah, because
that means what I'm hearing is then I've got to take less out because if I take more out, I'm going to hit another tax bracket. So I mean, what's the strategy?
So and then of course the third bucket. Yeah. You got the third bucket is the bucket that we would all love to be in, where the money goes in after tax, but when it pours out, there's no tax. Yeah. No tax at all. So obviously we'd love to be in that bucket. The trick is you got to be balanced out in your buckets. If you have everything, and I've inherited a few clients that have everything in that qualified bucket, and the retirement's like here. And
right on top
of them. So if we're going to try to maintain their current living status, we're going to have to, they're going to have to pay a bunch in taxes to pull that money out if they do it all at once. So, before they retire, we need to have some kind of strategy to leak some of it somewhere else, preferably in one of the other buckets. So if you go to the third bucket, which the money goes in after tax, and you pay the tax out so you have tax free, you need to have some money in that bucket. Yeah. If we don't have any money in that bucket, we're in for a hard time because we don't know what we're going to get taxed when we retire. And at that point, the income that you were making may be gone.
Yeah. Well, you're going to be eating less, doing less, and, you're not going to go to work and have all that expense to go to and from work, buy all the nice clothes. And, I get it.
So, James, let me ask you a question here. So on that, you're fine. You're right on track. But and that's really the reality of what happens is that people don't do that. But the people come in your office, do they plan to have a retirement where eating hot dogs and baked beans? Are they planning to have a retirement to sit at home and never leave?
Yeah.
Is that kind of retire? Is that the kind of? I mean, I don't know about your clients, but my clients are not coming in my office saying, "Hey, yeah, I want to retire that way."
Well, of course, nobody wants to retire that way. My experience, and you talk about the 3 buckets, and you're on bucket 3. You got to bucket 3, right? So recap that for me because I was taking notes. So first bucket
is the money goes in after you pay tax, when you take out, you get taxed on the gain.
Right.
So you invest it in a stock, you invest it in a bond,
a non open account. You buy an annuity, you buy a CD, a non-qualified account. That's
non-qualified account.
It could be a checking account.
It could be a check that pays interest. Yes,
exactly.
You're gonna. I mean, because you get the little 1098 every year to give you your account and to put on your taxes.
Yeah, I got to pay a fraction of a penny on the interest on it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so bucket 2.
So bucket 2 is the money that goes in It's pre-tax. It's tax deferred. You're kicking
pre-tax.
You need to understand. You're not getting tax free. You're kicking the bucket down.
So pre-tax, and then it's taxed when it comes out.
When it comes out.
And then the third bucket, what you're saying is after tax dollars go in,
right?
But then there's a tax-free coming out.
Tax-free coming out.
That'd be like a Roth.
Yeah, Roth works in that category.
So, I just want to be clear on the three buckets because, you hear a lot of that. The listener or the viewer can see a lot of that, the bucket kind of conversation on the internet. And I released I think I did a presentation at the Nelson Nash Institute, 7, 8, 9 years ago. And I used the characteristics. I pointed out the characteristics of 4 types of instruments, that you could do. And I had a fourth one. So it was beyond the 3 bucket. And I didn't call them 3 buckets. I'm just saying there's.
Right. You had 4 types.
Tax, deferred, tax deductible, pre-tax, and Nirvana sits on the far. The 4th bucket is where Nirvana is, which is a combination of trust and life insurance, in my opinion. Okay.
Right. Okay.
And we're not necessarily going to go off into that, and we're not even trying to make a big presentation of anything, but okay. So we have clarity on the buckets, and I'm saying there's still a goal out there, right?
Right. So if you're all in bucket 2, which is that I put the money in tax deferred like a 401k, and I turn the faucet on and I have no other monies, I'm going to pay a lot in tax.
Right.
In the end,
right,
which will hamper my retirement. So we have to be balanced out. Now, it's great if you're making, like we go back to the cash balance, for example, if you're making, $300,000 a year, that's unlikely you're going to sustain that during retirement. So yeah, it's great to put that money in pre-tax into a cash balance plan, for example, and then you have to have a strategy to get it out, and there's ways to do that. See, and
excuse me, the third bucket is. Tell me again, because I'm making notes.
It's okay.
I'm the slow guy.
No, you're good. So the third bucket's the one that the money goes in after tax.
Yeah.
But when you turn the faucet on, there is no taxes.
Okay. So the cash balance plan now is. Something that, it's a defined benefit, and you're paying with pre-tax dollars on the contribution, properly termed, right?
Right.
And then when it comes out, it's taxable at ordinary income. And then you're saying, well, you got to have a strategy to avoid the taxes later, or reduce or mitigate.
You're going to mitigate them down a little bit to make sure you're doing that.
And one of them, of course, my clients don't eat dog food or cat food, but let me say, I've done this, a long time like you, and I've met lots of people, and lots of people are in for a rude awakening whenever the idea of retirement comes along. Rude awakening. And you kind of mentioned it too, and I point it out all the time. And actually, in the Banking with Life DVD, I have a nice section there about qualified plans. And I've experienced lots of clients over my career when they're in retirement. And you mentioned it earlier, the majority of their wealth, quote unquote, money is in a qualified plan or the equity in their primary place of residence.
Yep.
Neither may be the best place to have all of your equity. Okay. But they get into retirement, and at 70 and a half, you had to take the RMDs. They moved it up to 72 here, I think, last year.
Right.
And and who knows, there's always bills in front of Congress. It depends on how much money gets passed around under the table, what the ultimate final bill looks like. But that's probably going to be moved up to age 75, the required minimum distribution.
Go without a doubt. And I don't know if you saw, but they released Secure 2.0.
Oh, yeah. Secure. See, the opposite at 180 degrees is Insecure.
Came out either I think Thursday afternoon. They came out of committee.
Yeah,
with
I was working. I had my head down working, talking to clients I dearly love.
I actually read it in a morning briefing that I read, but I actually read some of it. It came out of committee 23-0. So there was no votes against it.
Right.
One of the biggest things they do.
Elections are right around the corner.
Right.
We got to have something to talk about. Look what we did for you.
Look what we did. So one of the underlying pieces in there is, you have the catch-up provision in your Roth or your 401k. In the Roth specifically, they have it phased out.
Of course, the more you make, you're getting out.
Now, the catch-up is this, not adjusted gross income. It said wages in the preliminary bill.
Oh, okay.
It said wages. It says if you make $100,000 in wages, you no longer qualify for a catch-up provision on your Roth.
Wow. See what we did for you? Yeah. We limited it and then we eliminated it.
And I think in there they were talking about extending the RMD again to 73 on this
75
version. 75,
there's a lot of bills going out there, but I've seen 75 banded about more than the other.
The other ones, right. So I think it's going that way, but it came out of committee 23-0.
Yeah.
Talk about a bipartisan, if you want to call it. Bipartisan.
I'm looking for confidence. I'm not getting it.
Right.
All the criminals agreed. Okay. So going back to the cash balance plan, it's going in pre-tax. I'm getting a tax deduction today.
Correct. Right. So if you need the tax deduction today, it's great. You just have to be really careful and strategic on the back end.
Right. And so that's an advantage, right? And
that's an advantage.
And then you have a quote unquote, in parentheses, quote unquote known benefit, in retirement, quote unquote. So, but those are advantages.
That's advantage. And a third advantage would be it goes into a trust, so it is protected against lawsuits and those kind of things. So it's insured by the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation,
right,
which you have to pay a premium for every year too.
Right. The employer does.
Employer does, right.
So. And, the rabbi, the trust, which I agree with, the money should be held in trust if it's going to be a true benefit. There is no Social Security trust fund where with qualified plans.
There is.
Right. Okay. So, and then the other benefit, the trust, and then the other benefit you said.
So it was guaranteed. You have,
the PBGC. The Pension
Benefit Guarantee Corporation.
Right.
Now, in a small business, you have a 98% likelihood of it. If you're in a big one that puts a lot of money in the marketplace, your premium, they've adjusted premiums. So those premiums are much greater today than they were a decade or even a decade ago. So
the PBGC operates kind of like the FDIC when it comes to banking, right? And SIPC when it comes to investments. So it's a NGO, non-governmental organization, right? And my question would be, and not that you would know, I don't know, is how much money do they have? And how much are they insuring, right? So, and they're skewed, unbelievable. They'll have fractions of pennies for the hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that they're insuring. Okay. Now
you're right. There's not.
But it does, it does add the layer of
that layer. It does.
So, if you have more than 250,000. It's almost like a guarantee associations, a state guarantee associations when it comes to life insurance contracts and annuity contracts. See, the life insurance contracts and annuity contracts are guaranteed by the issuing insurer, and that guarantee is backed by their claims paying ability. All right, heavily regulated. Okay, so. But then the secondary guarantee, which is not a sales point, this is educational. I'm not giving any advice to anyone whatsoever. I only engage with or give advice to clients. So the Guarantee Association, every state has them. And so life insurance has secondary guarantees of up to like $300,000 in face amount, $100,000 in cash value, annuities up to like $250,000 per account value. And my point here is the PBGC also has limits on their guarantees.
Correct.
Right. But they're secondary to the entity that created the product or the trust program and the money held in trust. Okay. Thanks for letting me take that sidetrack.
No, that was actually a really good sidetrack because it's a valid point. It's a valid point you're making. Right. So, and that's going back to your valid point that you just made. One of the reasons we often put guaranteed instruments in a cash balance plan is for the very reason you said. And so when the PBGC sees those, your premiums are much lower.
Because the PBGC isn't going to double insure that amount.
They're not. They already know.
It's like going and buying property and casualty insurance. And it's like, I'll self-insure, quote unquote, for the first, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million. And then, so I'm going to retain that risk and then
go buy reinsurance.
To insure above that amount. So that's why the premium goes down at the PBGC, because they're not standing good for that. They're relying on life insurance companies that issue the life insurance policies and the annuity contracts that go into the programs.
Yeah.
But it could save the employer a few dollars.
Pennies and dollars. So, and again, there's advantages too. You just have to understand what you're getting into.
And so there are three. Those are really kind of four advantages: tax deductibility, the quote unquote known benefit in retirement, quote unquote retirement. Then the assets are held in trust,
the protection of the trust,
right? And then they're backed by the PBGC. What are the other advantages?
So there's some other advantages depending on what vehicle you're going to put. Which a vehicle is the one where you put the money.
Yeah.
Not the custodian, actually where the money is.
Right.
What is it in the market? Is it in annuity? Is it in life insurance? So, it does advantage them to put them in life insurance. And there's two schools of thought on this. Some people do not like life insurance inside any kind of plan.
Yeah, they're like, life insurance is very polarizing. It's like politics.
Yeah.
It's love it or hate it.
You love it or hate it. Yeah. So some of them will go, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Why would you want to put your money into a life insurance inside the plan because you're not going to get it back? Well, I've already had 3 payouts of life insurance, and I don't think any of those families would say, I don't
need the money.
I don't need the money.
No, you keep it, Pete.
Yeah.
It's like, I bet none of them ever said, wow, this is too much.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Never heard that.
Never heard that, not once.
Have you ever heard, is this all?
No, I've heard,
is there any more?
Is this all? Is there any more?
Yeah. Well, the conversation with Pete went a little long, so we're going to stop here. We'll pick up where we left off next week in part 2. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us on the Banking with Life podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and click on that little notification bell. Otherwise, join us on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher for weekly content.